Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election using the 13 keys model. This is the model that has been very accurate in the past. Since 1984, it's predicted all but one presidential election correctly, and we'll be talking about it today. So again, let's just get into it. Another time to review. This is another time where you can be reviewing a forecast. We'll be giving you the pros, the cons, and kind of a verdict at the end. So we've got a lot to get to. Let's talk about it. This is the 13 keys model on your screen. It is a series of 13 prompts that are either true, which helps the incumbent, or false, which helps the challenger, or rather the incumbent party in this case. And these keys, they're questions you have to answer. And if the incumbent party wins 8 keys, they win. If the challenging party wins 6 keys, they win. So it's easier for the challenging party to win, but again, the keys for them are harder to obtain. So this model was created by Allan Lichtman. I think he's been doing it every year since 1984. And he got every election right except for 2000, where he predicted Al Gore would win, I believe. But that's, again, not a very unfair prediction. Al Gore could have easily won that election, and he won the popular vote. And it was, it wouldn't have been surprising at all at the time had Al Gore won that election. So, no shame at all to me in predicting that election incorrectly. Now, the interesting thing about this model is that Lichtman has claimed that he got 2016 right, which is certainly true. He kind of went back and forth in September and October of that year. And I, if I recall correctly, he did at points say Hillary Clinton was going to win. And then I think in his final prediction, he did have Donald Trump winning. But the interesting thing is that he kind of, and this isn't me criticizing him. I'm just kind of reporting on what happened. He, in the aftermath of 2000, where he got that election wrong, he said, okay, well, this model only predicts the popular vote, right? So then it was still technically right in that Al Gore won the popular vote. But then in 2016, after he picked Trump to win, which good for him, not a lot of people did pick Trump to win that election. Trump lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton, but won the Electoral College. So, I don't say that to, disparage the model. Certainly, if he actually did predict Trump to win, that is excellent, and there's no shame in Al Gore, getting that wrong. But those are just the minor controversies that some people have called Lichtman out for. But broadly, this is a good model, and the reason I like it is because it's unique, right? Like most models, you plug in some numbers and you get an output. This model doesn't do state by state. It doesn't give you a number, but it tells you who's going to win the presidency. And fundamentally, it's actually very simple. This is the simplest model you're ever going to come across. It's basically 13 questions, but they all are phrased in a way that is the incumbent, or is the president / incumbent party popular? Do people like them? And has anything bad happened? One of those two things, right? Scandal, military failure, bad economy. Those are all things that would go under something bad happening. Charisma, primary contest. Those are all related to how popular the incumbent is. That's what all these stem for. This is kind of just a longer way of saying, hey, do we think that the country's in a good position? If it is, the incumbent probably wins. And that's a good way to look at this. It's a simple way. I'm a huge fan of simple explanations. Whenever I make a prediction myself, I always try to make the simplest case for it. Oftentimes, if you are, making a bad prediction, like a rule that I have for myself is that if I can't explain a prediction in one sentence, it's probably wrong. And again, using that principle, this is one of the best models out there. So that's the strength of it. The other thing that I really like with this model is that it's subjective, but not in a bad way, right? And that's a double-edged sword, which we'll get into in the cons section of the video later. But I really like that it's so subjective because, again, when you take a look at this model, right? Like you could make the case either way. For example, military failure, or I think you can make the case that Donald Trump is in fact a charismatic challenger. But again, Allan Lichtman himself, he's the one who does the keys every year. It's not, me. I can fill them out one way, but he's going to fill them out, however he wants, and that is going to is what's going to be used as the official 13 keys prediction because he's the one who built them. He's the one who knows, kind of how to answer them to the best of his abilities. So again, that is why this model, to me, I think those are two reasons why you like it, why it's good. Now, there are some serious flaws to this model that I'm going to be getting into, and that'll give you my verdict. So the first problem with it is exactly the opposite of what I just said was a benefit. Now, obviously, the subjectivity can really help because I think it's important for the person who builds the model to be able to fill it out correctly, but also the fact that you can make the case either way for some of these keys makes it so that the model itself can be manipulated if you want a particular outcome. Right now, if I really wanted to convince you Donald Trump was going to win, I could do that pretty easily by just, manipulating some of the keys. If I want to do the same thing for Kamala Harris, if I wanted to convince you Kamala Harris is going to win 10 or 11 of these keys, I could do that right now as well. That's the main problem with it, is that it's subjective and you can kind of twist them and interpret them in a certain way. Again, the good news is that it doesn't matter what I say, it matters what Allan Lichtman says. And if obviously it's his incentive to be correct because he wants to maintain his respect in this, field. But again, that could be a problem. Now, the other main problem that I think this model has is that it doesn't actually adapt, and this is the biggest problem it has. It doesn't actually adapt to the circumstances that surround an election. So this model, I think, was going to be wrong if Joe Biden was still on the ballot, because everything stays the same, except in this case, this key would be safe for the Democrats. So Joe Biden would actually be winning by more than Kamala Harris, which in and of itself is a problem, because I don't think, even if Joe Biden pulled off a victory in November, if he stayed in the race, I do not think that he would have been a stronger candidate than Kamala Harris at any point, as we've seen in the polls. But again, the problem with this model is that, regardless of how you think Kamala Harris is going to do compared to Joe Biden, if you believe the 13 keys, and Al Lichtman himself said that if Joe Biden stayed in the race, he would have won, according to the keys. So that is a pretty clear indication of a problem to me, because Joe Biden, wasn't out of it. I don't think he had a 0% chance of winning, but he was a very clear underdog. He was losing in every poll, in every swing state. Nationally, he was down 2 or 3 points. He was in a very bad spot. He was in a spot so bad, in fact, that his own party had to do something so unprecedented. They had to, really pressure him to step down because they feared they were about to lose a very winnable election. And now this election is a lot closer. Now I think Kamala Harris, you could argue, is favored to win this election. We'll talk about that another time. But again, the fact this model had Joe Biden winning the election by not only winning it, but winning it by more than Kamala Harris would be winning it by, is a pretty clear indication of a flaw. And the reason that this is flawed is because, once again, it doesn't adapt. Joe Biden, in theory, could have, if on paper Joe Biden should have won re-election relatively easily. His challenger, Donald Trump, say what you want about Donald Trump, but obviously he has a lot of scandals, a lot of skeletons in his closet. He's a very controversial figure. A lot of people love him. A lot of people also don't like him. Joe Biden himself, got a lot of legislation passed during his presidency. I've heard a lot of arguments why it's good. I've heard, an equal number of arguments as to why it's bad. Hey, I'm not endorsing either side. I'm, not here to tell you what to think. But objectively, Biden, did things, and he had a platform to run on. And so, obviously, in theory, you'd think that he would be on track to win re-election because, again, there is major policy, like this key 7, Biden enacted major policy change. The economy broadly was getting better. It's right now on the uptick compared to where it was, 2 or 3 years ago. So on paper, Biden should have won re-election. So I get that. Fundamentally, I get the case for why Biden should have won. But if you looked at the polls and you looked at the sentiment of the national public, it was abundantly clear Joe Biden was not going to win re-election. Why? Americans had a problem with his age, first of all, and that was exacerbated by the debate. They got so much worse post-debate. And secondly, Donald Trump was running a better campaign than Joe Biden in the final months of the Biden campaign. I thought Biden's messaging was very bad. I thought he was really hurting himself and shooting himself in the foot repeatedly, especially with his plan, to kind of target some states and not others. I thought Donald Trump in that debate was more presidential than Biden. And again, this is not me endorsing Biden or Trump or Biden or Harris or Trump. I'm just saying I think objectively in the final 2 months of that campaign, Trump was running the better campaign. Now I think that it's back up in the air, but there was obviously a point where I think Trump's campaign was looking better. But right, like this model can't pick up on that. It doesn't see that. Whereas a statistical model like the model that I build, or Nate Silver's model, or G. Elliott Morris's model, you can plug in polling averages and the model will see that and it'll change over time. This model doesn't do that. It doesn't adapt. And that to me is the biggest problem, is that you can have, fundamentally, you can have an electorate that looks, or an election that looks like it will go a certain way because of certain circumstances. When you actually, dig deeper and you look at the sentiment of the public, it is very obvious. In fact, you could build an election where the incumbent, say, is not super popular, doesn't have any scandals, has passed a lot of major legislation, and didn't have a primary contest, but for some reason maybe his challenger did something incredible, and his challenger is going to win 400 electoral votes, right? You can never account for that using this model, and that's the problem. It doesn't pick up on the polls. It doesn't pick up on true public opinion. It just measures what public opinion should be, and that is very hard. It's very hard when that happens for a model to actually predict it. So that's why I'm not as big a fan of this model as a lot of other people are. Obviously, it's unique, it's good, it does reflect a very fundamentals-based analysis of American elections. Professor Lichtman is a very smart individual who has been doing this for 40 years, way longer than I have. Um, but based on, those conclusions that I've drawn, the subjectivity, the fact that you can, really see either way on either of the keys, and the fact that this model doesn't pick up on true public sentiment, even if that sentiment is right or wrong or expected or unexpected, that's a problem for the model. So, yeah, I like the model. It's good for discourse, but I wouldn't, use it to justify a prediction. I wouldn't, necessarily use it to, guarantee a Harris victory if he picks Harris to win next week, or a Trump victory if he picks Trump to win next week. We just have to, look at the polls, look at where the American public is headed, and we'll see where we end up. So again, let me know what you want to see next. This was a suggestion from multiple people literally yesterday, and I was like, hey, why not do it? So again, I also just want to say, well, I didn't mean to click on that tab. By the way, great band, super underrated. I just want to say thank you all so much for this milestone. It really just means so much to me. Like I can't properly put into words just like how grateful I am for 10,000 subscribers. That number is way too big for me to comprehend. The fact that I have 6 subscribers means, it surprises me that, people listen to me talk about politics. So truly, like every YouTuber ever says this and they hit a milestone, but I, to the best of my abilities, want to convey that I do truly mean this. It means the world to me. And whatever you guys want to do to celebrate 10K, I'm down for. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for the suggestions. Keep them coming. And I'll see you all next time.